Get sales lessons from experts and entrepreneurs.
Go out there and be the spokesperson and the representative for the brand.
On how you can bring your A game in selling.
Making sales requires putting yourself out there and being vulnerable.
To start and scale your business.
We need to negotiate for what we deserve.
This is Ace the Sales Podcast, and here's your host, Roshni Barronia.
Hey there, thank you so much for joining me in today's episode where I have with me Shwetha Sivaraman, who is a writer, podcaster, yoga teacher, ICF certified coach, and entrepreneur. What's interesting is that Shwetha and myself have been connected on digital platforms for more than 2 years. In fact, she is also featured on my blog series, A Woman's Voice, which puts the spotlight on women podcasters because she's got a wonderful podcast called Being Miraculous. And a couple of times we've also intended to talk to each other on a Zoom call or do a virtual coffee, but something or the other came in the way and we just couldn't make the time for it. So I finally thought, let's do a podcast interview with her, which will be a big enough reason for us to hop on a call and take the opportunity to finally connect with each other at a deeper level. So here we are. And on a side note, if you too want to engage your network, peer group, community, or previous clients, a podcast could be a great way to build connections and harness the power of network. To know more about how to start a podcast, get in touch with Done For You Podcasts from the link given in show notes. And now, join me in welcoming a wonderful person on our podcast today. Hey Shweta, so happy to have you here. Finally, we could sit across each other after so many failed attempts. So I'm so happy to have you with me today.
Likewise. Nothing like a podcast to have a good conversation.
Absolutely. It's such a conversation starter. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Shweta, because of course there are so many things that you do in businesses and you do multiple businesses also. Of course, we'll touch upon all of those things as well in our conversation. But just to give a little bit brief about what you do.
Sure. I wear multiple hats, like you already said, but broadly the hats that I wear are I'm a writer, a podcaster, an entrepreneur, and a coach. I'm the founder of Being Miraculous, which is essentially a community aspiring to help people discover and live their true potential. I'm also the coach and the co-founder for a company called Newer Me that's working towards democratizing access to coaching. And as a person, I basically am a seeker, and a lot of things that I really want to discover and live in terms of my fullest life is what I do through my work and my writings. And I'm also an aspiring novelist. I'm writing my first debut self-help book, which is in the works and will hopefully see the light of the day someday soon.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting to know. Whenever you launch and come out of it, we do come back to the podcast. We love to discuss it.
Why not? Absolutely.
Yes. So Shweta, before we get on to the main set of your entrepreneurial journey and how you approach sales in your business, let's pick a little bit of your brain to know the other side of you, which we call behind the scenes on Ace the Sales, BTS on ATS. So are you ready for that rapid fire round?
All right, bring it on.
So tell us one thing that we won't find or know from your profile or social media or website.
I think one thing people will probably not know is that I love being quiet. I love the silence. I love solitude. For a person who loves to speak, one of the ways I actually rejuvenate is by doing silence. So it's something that I try and do as a weekly practice in terms of maintaining days of silence if I can afford it, or if not days, at least 10 to 12 hours of just being quiet. No phones, no distractions, no words, no books, no TV, nothing. So I enjoy the silence.
Actually, that's the kind of world I am having right now. Not by choice, but by default, because my son has moved to US for his studies, and my husband goes out to work early in the morning, 8 o'clock, and it's only me in the house. So I'm by default having that silent zone. So it's good. Okay. So, Shweta, describe yourself in 3 words.
I think seeker is one word. I'm always curious in terms of finding out more and discovering more about myself. I'm a very happy-go-lucky person as well. I extremely okay going with the flow and living it at the moment. And I think spiritual, I'm deeply, deeply spiritual. And I think that's the anchor that guides a lot of my actions. So I would say spiritual is the other word.
Okay, that's lovely. Next question. When I say successful woman business owner, who comes to your mind?
I don't know, many of them. I think the first name that comes to my mind is Kirti Punia. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her.
Founder of
Okai.
Okai. Yeah, she's moved from Okai from Relab. Yes. Awesome. And the dedication and the way she has revolutionized the way people see social enterprises and community work and working towards upliftment of underprivileged women. It is something very, very remarkable. So I'm so glad you mentioned Kirti Punia. Yes.
Yeah, I think that was the first name that came up. Yeah.
Awesome. So, Shweta, let's move into our main set of knowing more about your business and your entrepreneurial journey. But first of all, congratulations on completing 3 years of Being Miraculous podcast. I mean, 135 episodes. So, tell me what made you start the podcast and what helped you stay consistent with it?
What made me start the podcast was coincidentally one of my most vulnerable moments in my life, actually. So I had moved out of the corporate in terms of identifying a life that I wanted to create. And I had been trying a lot of things at that time. It was 6 months since I moved out of the corporate. And there were just so many things that I hadn't discovered and figured out. And almost every day was a new learning for me. And I'd reached a stage where almost it was becoming hard to capture how fast I was growing, right? And the podcast started as a means simply to record my own learnings. It was just a way for me to capture all the things that were coming up in my self discovery process and to sort of, box them in and categorize it. It was purely a personal need. I always joke about it saying that, I always thought it would just be my mother and my sister listening, saying, hey, great job, but before I knew it, the words started resonating with so many people. And that's when the responsibility also came in terms of how do I really add value? Because until then, it was a very selfish need. It was very specific in terms of what was I learning through the process. But then when it went out to an audience, then the responsibility came in saying, how can I really facilitate this for others as well? So that's what opened up. And consistency is a very big question. We can probably do 1 hour on that separately, but I'll try and be as brief as possible. So, first thing, like I said, was the responsibility, because a couple of months when I started rolling out the podcast, there were people who reached out to me saying that they were almost on the verge of committing suicide, and these words helped them and gave them a reason to sort of hold back on that and not go ahead. And so these things started making me realize that this was bigger than what I wanted it to be or what I envisioned it to be, and there was some importance to others' lives, right? So it became a very conscious process for me after that stage, wherein I said that there are people who are listening to it. That means I need to hold the medium very responsibly, right? And really only share things that were very, very true and authentic to me, and the things that I've experienced, and also create a space where people can actually learn about themselves in the process, right? And second, what really helped me be consistent was why I started. The reason I started was because I felt underrepresented, right? Because I had made a lot of courageous decisions in my life, and I wasn't sure if my life is going to turn out to be a success or a failure. I still don't, right? I'm a work in progress person. And for a person who's work in progress, there's literally nothing out there, because you only are fed success stories or failure stories, right? From people who have made it or people who have not made it. But what about the people in between, striving, not knowing how the end is going to happen, but are still showing up every single day to be the best person they can be? I felt that's a story worth sharing. So that's why, if you notice in our podcast, we don't bring in the successful people who have already made it happen, because then it's just a fairy tale, right? You've read enough about it. I want to talk about real people who are still struggling, who are still doing their best. And for me, that became my motivation, because I felt like it would have helped for me to know that somebody else was also on the journey, that somebody else is also working every day without knowing how it's all going to turn out. And that was inspiring for me. And it turned out to be inspiring for others. So the consistency came from the why I started, that people who are work in progress also deserve representation. And they are already a success for showing up every single day. Regardless of whether that external world success is hit or not, I wanted them to realize the importance of what they're doing and show up for them a little bit more at ease. Not so like, like the whole world is on our responsibility. And, only if I make it to that success, I'm worth it. To have that sense of self worth in that process, to enjoy what you're doing because you love doing it. So I wanted to bring in all of those things. And that's where the consistency happened, because that why became much more important than who I was or what I was trying to achieve through the podcast.
That's so important. In fact, that's something which I keep telling to my clients as well who start their podcast is that the first step is to identify your why. Impact is much bigger than the metrics that you are chasing. So, thanks for validating that and underlining that, because even if one person who gave away that thought of committing a suicide just by listening to your words, that's massive. That's job done. So that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. So I know you are a creator and you are a writer, but do you feel ever the creator block, not knowing what topic to speak on or who to invite next in your podcast? So how do you get past that? So because consistency in one is one aspect, then overcoming that creator block is another.
Absolutely right. So I think it is a natural process for every creator. And I also accept that as a part of the process, therein that there might be days when the words come out very easily, and there might be days when nothing comes out, right? So you need to accept both the stages of it and not condemn yourself for one and not celebrate yourself too much for the other. So finding that equanimity as a creator, I think, is very, very important, because otherwise you get too high up in the air and too low down in the dumps, and it really affects your stability, right? I feel that as a creator, stability is very important, and that comes from working on yourself, right? So understanding yourself, understanding your values, understanding what triggers you, understanding what drives you, what drains you, these are things that you need to know so that you can create a ecosystem which helps you thrive, right? The second thing I would say is to overcome creative block is that make sure that your sources of information are legit and good in terms of inspiring you always, right? So as much as I would love to keep scrolling Instagram and social media, I know for a fact that I'm not really learning anything new or getting inspired by scrolling, right? So it is very important to know. So for me, I'm a philosophy junkie, right? So I love reading Vedanta and your Yoga Sutras and Bhagavad Gita. So for me, there is a lot of inspiration I derive from it. So trying to carve out time from your sources of inspiration really helps, right? So for me, it's like if once I finish my meditation in the morning, the first thing, even before I turn on my phone, I try to do 30 minutes or 45 minutes of that reading, right? So whatever it is that catches my fancy on that morning, but pick up a Yoga Sutra book, understand a new sutra, try to delve into that meaning, whatever it is, right? So identifying and making time for things that inspire you help a lot. The third thing that I actually do is that I have this Notion sheet where I've captured all my inspiration writings, right? So any quote that I read or anything that I love and that really connects with me through any of my books, I have that as a dump in one place. And anytime I'm low on inspiration, I simply go back there and read. And one thing or the other from that list always hits the right spot, and I'm back in action. And the other thing I think for creative block is that what works for me is, when inspiration strikes when you don't least expect it, right? So for example, I have Notion on my phone always ready in hand so that whenever I get an idea, I can quickly jot it down. So when I'm going out for my long walks and suddenly something strikes me and I note it down, and then I just pick those ideas up later when I'm short of ideas in terms of what to write. So having that wish list of ideas and capturing it, because we kind of tend to assume that we'll remember things, but we don't, right? So even in the
Because the best ideas come up in the shower. So you cannot even do anything about it. The moment you come out, you have to note it down somewhere.
Absolutely. So before Notion, I used to have this place where I almost in every corner of my house, I would have a notepad and a pen, right? But then over a period of time, tracking them became very tricky because they were all dispersed and in different spaces. So digital technology helps, right? So having cloud note-based systems on your phone really work.
Yeah. I do the same with Evernote because, yes, that is also something, a great tool. So, the essential underline and the bottom line is that you need to have some tools in your kitty which can help you capture those inspirations, which can provide you that creative stimulation. at the right moment. Great. Thanks for sharing that, Shweta. And one last question around podcasting before we get into your coaching space is that how does your Being Miraculous podcast, which is also the name of your business and website, which is, I think, is a really smart thing to do, how does that help you in your business?
So in my case, actually, I became an accidental entrepreneur with Being Miraculous. This was not a planned business with like a revenue model and things that were already there in place. Being Miraculous essentially was simply my blog, which was a written blog from 2016, which turned into a podcast in 2019. And like I said, when people started listening to my podcast, they started coming out to me and said, what should I do in my life? Should I quit my job? Walk out of my relationship and things like that, right? And this was over Instagram. So obviously, when these kind of things happened, it kind of made me take a step back and say, hey, wait a minute. Till now, I've been sharing my life discoveries, and that was easy because I know I've experienced it and I've learned from it. But how do I really make that change happen for somebody else, right? That was not something I was trained in or equipped to. And that's when I actually met coaching. I met a lot of coaches at that time. I had them as podcast guests, or I encountered interactions with them. And, it was almost like the universe signaling, saying, this is the answer you're looking for.
So the podcast led you to coaching.
Yeah. So I started the podcast in 2019, October. And coaching is something that I discovered end of March or April. I did not even know about coaching as an industry before that. I was that naive. But I discovered coaching through the podcast, and I signed up for my coach training in June. So I became a coach. I completed my training end of September, and I got ICF credentialing done a year later. So September 2021 is when I officially became a coach as an ICF coach. But yeah, so my business model happened the other way around. So it came from the need, and that turned into a business.
Hey there, hope you've been loving the episode so far. Just wanted to take a moment to invite you to Ace the Sales Club, which is a tribe of women small business owners who dream, dare, and do amazing stuff. If that's you, which I'm sure you are, just sign up for it from the link given in show notes, as every month we share with you tools and resources that can save you time, save you money, or help you make more money as a solopreneur. So sign up for the club from the link given in show notes. And now back to the episode. Many a times people see podcast or any other content creation platform as something which is supporting their business growth. But to just flip around the table and say that your podcast led to your coaching and you becoming a coach, that is something unheard of. And that was something very miraculous. Thank you. So you said that, of course, you came to know about coaching industry quite recently, like back in 2020, I would say. So what were some of the initial challenges you faced? I know that you just mentioned that it was not a very planned business, but I believe it turned out very beautifully. But of course, that takes a little bit of work. So what were the initial challenges and how did you overcome that?
Yeah. So first of all, it was completely new. It was not a planned thing. So that was not something that I was ready for, because I already had another business and a day job that was taking care of my income and everything like that. But this seemed to be taking up a lot of my energy, and I really loved doing what I was doing. So it was interesting and challenging at the same way. And I think a couple of challenges were, one, how do you really set up a coaching practice? Discovering what coaching is, what value it is, and also a lot of mindset shift, because I'm a very self-dependent and very independent person specifically. So for me to even take on that role of as a coach required a lot of work and breakthrough for me, because I'm used to giving, but I'm not used to taking. But how can you really be a coach unless you're coached yourself? Unless you get the value out of it, I don't think you can show up as a good coach. So it was a lot of unlearning and relearning for me at that stage. And obviously there were multiple challenges, because it's one thing, like I have experience in sales before. After my MBA, one of my first job was sales, and not just any sales, it was B2B sales. So I was literally sitting across CXOs and selling them our product offerings. And so sales is not something that's new to me, but it felt brand new to me when I was trying to sell myself and my experience, right? Because there was no company I can hide myself under. There was no brand logo on my face, or on my visiting card. It was me that I was trying to sell. So there was a lot of challenges in terms of, am I good enough? Who am I to actually coach somebody else? All the imposter syndrome, worries, whether I'll actually be able to help, fear, what if I fail, or what will others think about me, judgments, right? So many things actually showed up. So it was a journey for me towards actually working all of those insecurities through myself first, and then to show up. So that was definitely a challenge. And three was that I'm not the very superficial kind of a person. So I don't say that, oh, 3 days and you'll become a self-aware person, or, 3 days to self-transformation. I can't even say that with a straight face, right? So for me, all of that is a joke. When that was the case, and I was talking about, how do you really invest long term in your growth? And I jokingly say this, that my goal as a coach is to be out of business as a coach, right? I feel that if you become self aware, if you are able to tap into your own inner wisdom, find the answers that you're looking for, that is the most sustainable way of living your best life. Coaching is a temporary solution. And that's exactly how I tell my clients as well, that don't form that dependency on me, because that doesn't work in the long run. It has to be something that you become independent. And that is a hard sell in today's world, where everybody wants instant gratification, where I tell them, you know what, you have to journal every single day. You have to do the work. You have to get your hands dirty and do it. I'm not going to give you a magic pill that will change your life tomorrow. So getting acceptance of that and realizing that that is not also going to happen overnight, because whether I like it or not, the market has things that say that change your life in 7 days, have this morning routine and your life turns around. We have those kind of things that keep coming in, right? So selling authentically and finding a way wherein you're conveying the message that is actually true to you, and being okay with the fact that you're not going to have that $1 million 6-figure enterprise tomorrow. I think the game of patience was a challenge.
At one point of time, you have to choose between what's your priority. You want to have soulful clients who value you, who respect you for the work, for the transformation you are bringing. Vis-a-vis, you are just having more money but less of impact. So what it is that matters for you most. And I'm so glad that you talk about that. Even before knowing that what you are selling, you have to work on yourself. So it was easy to hide behind someone else's brand, but when you are the brand, when you are the business yourself, things are very different. So can you talk to us a little bit more about what were the kind of things that you had to do in order to get comfortable selling your brand and your personality and your business?
Absolutely right. I think I see that with a lot of my solopreneur or entrepreneurial coaching clients as well, that we are all very focused on the external things, right? Get your website in place, get yourself listed on Amazon, Shopify, and all of those things. Make your social media happen. This. Do 20 reels in a month, and all of those things, right? We are very out there in terms of things we need to do and accomplish and get those awards in place. But what about who's showing up? Who's the person showing up for the business? I think that we give very little attention to it. And what we don't realize is that that person is calling the shots, especially in solopreneurs, right? And that's a realization that even I had, that if I didn't take care of myself, if I did not understand my insecurities, and if I did not catch myself before I reacted, all of those affected my business. I was the business, right? So unless you work on yourself, you make yourself into some shape and form of being whole, and then go out in the world, all of your actions are not as effective as you want them to be, right? So, I work with social media. I mean, I work with entrepreneurs who believe that they have to show up on social media no matter what, but they never realized that how much it drained them, right? They never started to question, saying that, how can I change my relationship with social media in a way that works for me and my business? Just because 100 other people are doing it doesn't mean that you do the same things. So understanding yourself, understanding what is your strengths and areas that can actually be leveraged, and then choosing what to do in the outer world, is very different than doing 100 things in the outer world and burning yourself out. And I think the reason, it changed the game for me as well, because I was also completely out there, because I thought Instagram was the way to go. Everybody I knew was on Instagram, and that's where I needed to build my business. If you see, even now, there are some 900 posts I've made on Instagram. Can you imagine the amount of time I've spent doing that? While I don't regret it, what I didn't realize in the process was that I was burning myself out. It took a lot out of me to show up that way, and it didn't really convert to anything significant, because how many of them really buy your business after watching a reel?
Yes. That's a great point. In fact, that is something which I wanted to put across you as well, because you are a writer and you are so good with words. They are magical. Your messaging, your post, your website, it somehow has a very spiritual and a calming effect to it, because of course that's the space you come with. But then, like you said, that. There also has to be an aspect of conversion or sales, and it doesn't happen if you don't come up or show up authentically. So whenever you are creating your content, be it on podcast, be it on social media or blogs or wherever it is, how do you make sure that how much of it is sales driven or call to action driven? How do you ensure, or is it not the objective? What's your take on it?
So the way I see it, and this is something I learned the very hard way, right? So when I started initially, when I started in my setting up my coach practice, I would give a call to action to almost every post, right? Thinking that that's going to convert my sales. I would sell, regardless of whether they all added up in any form. Until I realized that, hey, this doesn't work, right? And people need to trust you first. No matter what business you're doing, you need to have that trust that, hey, there is something that resonates with this person and it works, right? And in my case, the podcast was already doing that job for me, right? The people who listen to the podcast would have resonated at some level, which is why they found me on socials and had a connect with me or had a conversation with me on some level, right? So I think it is important. What I realized, at least in the process, was that if you approach content creation with the goal of just pure play sales, it doesn't work. My approach to creating my podcast, even before the business model happened, made a lot more sense for me, which I realized later. That is, you give value. You provide value for the sake of providing value. If it converts, brilliant. If it doesn't convert, find other offline sources of network, right? Don't substitute online conversions for your business model. Because what I've realized is that, see, what we do is that we look at top influencers in every space, right? Oh, that coach does a video every single day and he gets conversions. So let me also do that. It took him a long time to get there. And maybe the time when they started and the time when you're starting is very different, which means your chances of online discovery are very, very less. The person, I mean, half the people I interview who are suddenly viral, they tell me that I don't even know what made me go viral, right? It is that random a process. And are you really working towards getting that random process for you? That doesn't make any sense, right? So what is my strategy is that I get clients through my offline connections and my conversations. Maybe 1 in 1,000 will happen through online, which is great. I welcome it. I'm working towards it. But that is not my source of bread and butter. My source of bread and butter is offline channels where I show up, I connect, I network with people and connections through which they work. And obviously, word of mouth helps. And also, don't spend all your time creating content for that, because you need to have other strategies of revenue. So I would say that, and maybe because I've seen this in the space of freelance content writers and everything, right? All of them are spending hours on LinkedIn, not honing their craft, not reaching out to prospective clients, and are worried as to where they're going to hit their numbers from. Likes is not equal to money in your bank account. Let's make that very, very clear. So create content for the sake of providing value, because that matters to you at some level. Think of it long term. Don't think of it converting into money in the month or 2 months or 3 months. Build a brand over a period or a decade, right? It will pay out at some point. I'm sure it will pay out, but don't rely on it paying out for your business today. Have a stream of cash flows and be sensible about money.
That's so important, because even if word of mouth or offline connections is the mainstream of bringing in the money, everyone is going online to check you out, your digital avatar, your credibility. And that's when the valuable content that you've created through whatever channel of your choices, whether social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, podcast, whatever it is, people are checking out your credibility through that branding and the content that you have created. And if that is value first, then definitely you've made your preference there. So thank you so much. It's been such a lovely and insightful conversation, Shweta. Just one last question before we conclude. What's your message to all the women entrepreneurs listening to Ace the Sales? How can they fall in love with selling?
What a powerful question. I think first thing I'll probably say is understand yourself first before you start selling. Understand yourself, understand your motives, remember why you're starting and why you're doing, and be very clear about who you are and who you need to be for the business, right? Once you have that self awareness and self knowledge, the second thing I would say is that identify your style of sales, right? So, for example, as an introvert myself, I am very, very of pushy, salesy people, right? I usually do not engage because I can't engage and it doesn't make. And the first thought when I started my coaching practice was that, oh my God, do I have to be like that? Do I have to tell the world that, I am the best person in the world? Come and learn from me. I will change your life, touch my hand, and you'll be transformed. So for me, it was the biggest thing because that didn't sit well with who I was at all. So identifying what is your style of sales and how can you be true to yourself in a way that it doesn't drain you but actually energizes you, right? So having this conversation is energizing for me. Am I also doing work for my brand? Yes, because it's going to reach the people who are listening to Ace the Sales who probably have never heard of Being Miraculous. But is it in a way where it's meaningful for me and you? Yes, right? So you can sell in a way that makes sense. 3, I would say, put yourself out there. I know too many women who are trying to learn, get to know more things, sign up for this course, sign up for that course because they feel they don't have all the information they need and who never act, right? So stop collecting information and start acting. Act with whatever knowledge you have as on date and iterate. Go out there, sell, iterate the process. What worked? What didn't work? How can I do it better? And I'll probably say, don't hesitate in asking for help. You're not alone in the process in terms of figuring out what you need to do and how do you need to go about it. There are many people who have already figured it out. Ask for help. And you'll be surprised at the number of times people actually more than happily help you out. And this is a lesson I had to learn also because, like I said, I was that independent, I'll figure it out all for myself. I'll learn it the hard way kind of a person until I realized, why am I being stupid, right? A LinkedIn message to somebody who's already been there and done that is telling you, hey, these are 3 things I tried. It didn't work. These are 3 things that worked. Try from there. You can, the learning curve is much faster. So eat that pride, swallow that pride, whatever you have to do. There is no harm in asking for help and actually doing the work that you want to do faster, right? Remember your why again and again. Remember, why does what you do matter? And if it does matter, you should get all the resources and support you need to make it happen and make it happen faster. There's no reason or pride in doing the hard way. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So beautifully said that if your why is big enough, no amount of limitations can come in the way of doing it. So beautiful, Shweta. Thanks for such lovely conversation and thanks for the beautiful pointers that you've given for women to fall in love with selling. And yes, everyone, please, listeners of Ace the Sales, go to Being Miraculous as well. It's a lovely, lovely podcast. You'll enjoy it and connect with Shweta from the links that we've given in the show notes. Pleasure to have you, Shweta, on this podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found any value in today's episode, then remember to recommend Ace the Sales podcast to at least one of your business buddies. You never know what insight they will get that can help them in their business. So do some good karma today. Finally, a loud shout out and thank you to the production team of Done For You podcast who helped me in bringing this show to you. If you too are looking to start your podcast for the business, get in touch with DFIP from the link given in show notes. Join me in the next episode for yet another conversation that can help you fall in love with selling. Till then, take very good care of yourself. This is your host, Roshni Baronia, signing off.